I read the complete wrong thing out again, haven't I? So, I'm back here doing this. This come out 2 days ago. DM and BF are two surviving roommates in 1122 King Road. At the time the homicides were believed to have occurred, DM saw a masked intruder in the house and began calling and texting the other housemates, including BF. Approximately 8 hours after DM saw the intruder, BF called 911 from her phone. Before the court is state motion to allow the text messages by DM and BF testimony about their conversations with each other about what DM saw and the 911 calls. The state argues that these communications are either not hearsay or qualify under one or more exceptions of hearsay rule. It also asks that a transcript of the 911 call be provided to the jury to view while listening to the audio. Defendant challenges several of the communications and objects to the use of the transcript. Why? Oral argument on the motion was held on the 9th of April 2025, after which court took the matters of under advertisement. The court finds that some of the hearsay statements on the 911 call do not qualify under the exceptions cited by state and therefore must be redacted. However, the balance of the 911 call as well as the text conversations noted herein are likely admissible, provided that the requisite foundation is laid at trial. The transcript will be allowed as a demonstrative aid and, again, assuming proper foundation is established. The court ruling specific text messages and phone activity and 911 statements are appended hereto in table format to Exhibit A and Exhibit B, respectively. 2. Standard. Whether the statements fall within the present sense of impression and or excited utterance exceptions is a question that is left to the sound discretion of the trial court, giving consideration to the totality of the circumstances. Use of demonstrative aids is also discretionary demonstrative determination. On discretionary matters, the trial court must 1. Correctly perceive the issue as one of discretion, 2. Act within and outer boundaries of its discretion, 3. Act consistently with the legal standards applicable to the specific choices available to it, and 4. Reach its decision by the exercise of reason. 3 facts with a 2 on it. I don't know why that 2's there. After spending the evening out, roommates DM and BF and Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Morgan returned to their home on 1122 King Road in early hours of the morning of November 13th. At approximately 2 a.m, they met up in Kaylee's bedroom and talked for a while before going to bed. The fifth roommate, Xana Coronado, who was out with her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, was not home yet. The roommates debated going out to the food truck for a late snack, prompting DM to send a text at 2:10 a.m. to an Uber driver she knew to see if he was driving. Ultimately, however, the girls decided to just go to bed. Approximately 4 a.m, DM heard strange noises and crying coming from the bathroom. She opened her door. At one point, she saw a man dressed in black with a ski mask on, walking by her bedroom door. She then placed calls and texts to her other roommates to see if they were awake. Only BF, who resided on ground floor, answered. They spoke once for 24 seconds, during which DM had told BF she thought she heard something. They spoke again. Minutes after 41 seconds, and DM told BF she saw a man with ski mask leaving the house. They then exchanged the following text messages between 4:22 and 4:26. DM to BF, no one is answering. DM to BF, I'm really confused. DM to Kaylee, Kaylee? DM to BF, what's going on? BF to DM, yeah, dude, what the fuck? BF to DM, Xana was wearing all black. DM to BF, I'm freaking out. DM to BF, no, it's like a mask. Almost. BF to DM, shut the fuck up. BF to DM, actually, DM to BF, like he had something over his head and a little mouth. DM to BF, Bethany, I'm not kidding. Oh, I'm freaked out. BF to DM, so am I. DM to BF, my phone is going to die, fuck. BF to DM, come to my room. BF to DM, run. BF to DM, down here. DM to BF, I'm screwed though. BF to DM, yeah, what? But it's better than being alone. During the foregoing exchange, DM also attempted contacting Ethan Chapin through Snapchat. She again tried calling Kaylee and Xana, but neither responded. Then excited, exited her room and began running towards BF's bedroom. On her way, she noticed Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom, with her head towards the wall and her feet towards the door. DM thought Xana was drunk. JG drowns. Once DM arrived at BF's room, they locked the door, and both made additional unanswered calls to other roommates. At 4:32, DM again texts Kaylee, please answer. BF testified to her recollection of the contents of these two calls before the grand jury. However, DM could not recall specifics about what was said. Typos and abbreviations are original text messaging. DF testifies before a grand jury the Instagram is a text messaging app that is used by young adults. With no response, between approximately 5 AM and 6:30 PM, DM engaged in activity on her phone, primarily creating, editing and deleting images and videos. Her phone activity then ceased until 8:05. Then DM accessed Instagram for a few minutes. At 10 AM, DM again accessed Instagram and communicated over Snapchat. At 10:23, she texted Madison asking, are you up? She received no response. DM continued to access Instagram and Snapchat until 11:29. When she texted Kaylee, are you up? Again, there was no response, with DM thought was strange because Kaylee and Madison were early wakers. DM continued to access various social media sites, including checking Ethan and Xana's Snap Map locations. At approximately 11:40, DM's father texted her about scheduling a time for a chat, to which DM responded. She also received 2 texts from a person named Xana stating, bro, and do you guys need me to come get you? It sounds pretty. I think that means scared. I mean, didn't she put 2 and 2 together when she saw Xana on the floor and this guy's walking about? I mean, I don't know. DM continued accessing various social media sites, including checking even and Snapchat, Snap macro locations. At approximately 11:50 am, DM called her friend EA and asked her to come over and check the house because she was scared. EA and her boyfriend HJ came over. They met DM and BF at the bottom floor of the house. Together, DM and BF and HG started to walk up the stairs on the second floor. When they reached the second floor, HG went to the kitchen to grab a knife. When he came back out, DM saw Xana again for the split second, and I just started bawling because I thought she had just I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still just drunk and all asleep on the floor. BF also saw Xana lying on the floor. HJ told DM and BF to get out. EA, who had started up the stairs, also turned around after HJ instructed her not to come any further. They both went outside shortly afterwards. HJ exited the house and told him to call 911. He was pale white and mentioned something about someone being unconscious. At 11:56, BF called 911 from her cell phone and spoke to Carolina Calvin at the 911 dispatcher. The call lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. During the call, the phone was passed around to different individuals. BF, DM, HG, and an unidentified female speaker, heaving, heavy breathing, crying can be heard throughout the call. BF spoke first, stating something is happening. Something happened in our house, and we don't know what. States Exhibit S2. 911 audio call. BF attempted to provide the address of the house to dispatch, but could not continue. At that point, an unidentified female speaker took the phone and provided the address and BF phone number. The following exchange ensued. So we're up to the police calls now, and I want people to keep an open mind about what trauma can do to the brain. I'm not saying that it's a reason, an excuse, or anything like that, but there's clearly a part of this girl that saw what Xana there and thought she was drunk, or whatever, unconscious. It sounds absolutely bizarre to us because we would say to ourselves, hang on, my good friend Darren, hang on, what's going on here? Is this some kind of, yeah, it does raise questions, but you've never been in that situation. Like, I ain't been in that situation either, so it's pretty difficult to say. 911 operator, okay, and tell me exactly what's gone on. The female, one of our roommates who's passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she's not waking up, sorry. Okay, says the 911 operator. The female then replies, oh, and they saw a man in the house last night. Yeah. The 911 operator, and are you with the patient? The DM answers the phone, then gets on the phone. Hi, this is Dylan Morrison, the 911 operator. Okay, I need someone to keep the phone, stop passing it around. DM, can I just tell you what happened? Pretty much. The 911 operator, what is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now? I don't really know, but I'm pretty much at 4 a.m. And it's like, hang on a minute, the operator is trying to ask her and you're trying to tell her about 4 o'clock in the morning. Which is pretty bizarre. Okay, I need to know what's going on right now. If someone is passed out, but let's not say that she's responsible for this because that's very, very poor. Maybe she just made the right decision. She made poor decisions, yeah? DM, yeah, I'll come. Come on, B. We got to go and check. She seems the braver out of the two, I'll be honest. But we have to. Is she passed out? She's passed out. What's wrong? She's not waking up. HJ, Xana? DM then informed dispatch that Xana was 20 years old. Oh, God. At this point, HG took the phone. Dispatch asked him if she was breathing, to which HG answered no. Law enforcement arrived at this point after confirming with DM that the responding officer had a defibrillator. Dispatch ended the call. Later, at approximately 1:04 that day, DM received a vandal alert regarding the homicide. Analysis. The state seeks to admit DM's and BM's phone records from 13th of November 2022, including call records and text messages, as well as illicit testimony by DM and BF regarding their communications with each other on November 13th, 2022. That they testified to before the grand jury. The state also seeks to admit the 911 call and the official transcript thereof. The state argues these records and communications are not hearsay, or they are accepted from hearsay as exited utterance or present sense of impressions. Defendants objects, arguing that apart from HG's statements to 911 that Xana was not breathing, the exceptions do not apply to the hearsay statement. The court finds the bulk of the statements are likely admissible, with 3 exceptions of statements made during 911 call. Now, I believe that Bryan has a problem with this. Hearsay is an out-of-court statement admitted to prove the truth of the matter asserted. To be hearsay, the statement must be intended as an assertion. We went through this on the last document, what it really means to be spontaneous, of fact, and offered by a prominent of purpose for proving the truth of assertion. Citations omitted. If a statement is hearsay to be admitted, it must fall under the exception. Hearsay statements on a 911 call can typically be admitted into evidence under either the public record or business record exceptions to hearsay rule. However, because citizens who call 911 are not under any duty to report, a record statement by a citizen must satisfy a separate hearsay exception. I see. Typically, these exceptions include the present sense impression exception and the excited utterance exception. For Clifford S. Fisherman Jones on the evidence, December 2024 update. The present sense of impression exception authorises the admission of hearsay if it is a statement describing or explaining an event or condition, maybe while or immediately after the declaration perceived it. The rationale... Can you stop doing that a minute? Sorry, hang on a second. Yeah. Go in the other room. Sorry, that's just my friend. The rational justifying of exception is that the immediacy of the statement offers no opportunity for fabrication. Citation omitted. The rule recognises that in many, or if not most, instances of precise temporality, I hope I said that right, is not possible, and hence a slight time lapse is allowed. Advisory Committee notes, emphasis added in Kezia in Idaho Supreme Court observed that time lapse as short as 45 minutes have been considered too long to invoke the protection of exception. See, they were reacting right away, which gives an indication. But if people are really, really not believing this, they're going to look into this and say, well, they had Bryan coaching them on. Well, I don't think so, I mean, only with Bryan that she would have been able to get through that if that was the case. And I don't think that was the case at all here. The excited utterance exception to hearsay rule authorised the admission of hearsay and testimony recounts a statement relating to a startling event or condition, while the declarant was under the stress of excitement caused by the event or condition to fall within the excited utterance exception 1. There must be, now that's where there's no time lapse at all. So they actually did that and had time lapse as well. So utterance and excitement and spontaneous reaction. The declarant's statement must be spontaneous reaction to that event rather than a result of reflection and thought. In considering whether a statement meets the excited utterance requirements, the totality of circumstances must be considered, including the amount of time that elapsed between the startling event and the statement, the nature of the condition or event, the age and condition of the declarant, the presence or absence of self-interest, and whether a statement was volunteered or made in response to a question. There is no bright line rule as to the allowable time span between the event and the statement, and one likely should not be drawn. As with present sense of impression and exception, the rationale underlying the excited utterance exception is the special reliability which is regarded as furnished by the excitement suspending the declarant's power of reflection and fabrication. Text messages and verbal conversations between DM and BF are likely admissible. This is an initial matter. The court finds that DM and BF acts and making phone calls, sending and receiving text messages, and other phone activities such as accessing social media are not hearsay. Hearsay only captures an oral assertion, a written assertion, or a non-verbal conduct intended as an assertion. Thus, this order will focus on the content of those calls and texts to the extent available. As to the content of DM and BF's text messages about what DM saw, the court finds they are either not hearsay because they are not offered for the truth of the matter asserted or not asserted assertions, or if hearsay, they likely qualify as a present sense impression and or excited utterance as set forth in Exhibit A here too. Their verbal discussions are potentially admissible for these same reasons. The state must establish the foundational requirements for such proffered statements at the time of the trial. Number 1, DM texts Uber driver at 2:10 to inquire if he is driving. The state seeks to introduce these texts to establish a timeline, because Zara was still I can't pronounce the name. Xavier was still alive. That's not a name, is it? Xana, is it? I'm sorry, Xana. The state seeks to introduce these texts, establish the timeline. Establish DM was awake and texting at 2:10. Defendant does not directly challenge the text because it is not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, and or not assertion of the fact. The court finds it is not hearsay under the IRA blah blah. Number 2, text messages between 4:22 and 4:26. The state argues that the 4-minute series of text messages between DM and BF with one of DM from DM to Kaylee are admissible either. You're too late for me, alarm. Either present sense of impression or excited utterance. Defendant suggests neither exception applies because there is no evidence they were sufficiently startled by the events. How would he know? He points out that DM claimed only to be confused, and despite stating she was scared, she ran to BF's room instead of leaving the house or otherwise calling other friends and family for help. The court agrees with the state for those texts to qualify as an assertion. He's a bastard. First, the present sense impression exception does not require a startling event. It simply requires that the speaker describe or explain a condition while personally perceiving it, or immediately thereafter. Most of DM's texts to BF satisfy this exception. And then continues. She first texts that her first text should be that no one is answering, she says, which describes the results of her calls to the other roommates just moments before. She also states that she was immediately feeling confused and freaked out and scared over what she saw and heard, and the fact that none of her roommates are answering. She further described the intruder she saw, i.e. wearing a ski mask or something over his forehead and mouth. She also relays that her phone is going to die. Thus, these statements are likely admissible as present sense of impressions. In addition, the events are sufficiently startling to both DM and BF for purposes of this excited utterance exception. DM and BF are young female college students and self-described scaredy cats of the house. 6 footnote says, several of the texts in the exchange are not assertions of fact, but rather inquiries and or commands incapable of being proved true or false. Noting that instructions, commands, requests, and inquiries are typically not assertions for purpose of, lying. Her text states she was scared, answering that A is right next to the cap blocks and the E is right next to the W key. It is evident she was likely texting quickly and accidentally and mistyped scared instead of screwed. GJ Trans at 17258. They were awoken from sleep after a night of drinking with DM, reporting that she heard foot noises and saw a masked intruder in their home. None of the other roommates were responding to their calls and texts, further indicating something was amiss. It would be potentially terrifying for anyone, including these young women, to argue that they would have ran out of the house and called someone else for help. Had they really been startled, unempathetically ignores these circumstances and the trauma and confusion they were evidently experiencing, which is likely an offset logical fault. So your logic goes out the window. You see, when you go into fright mode, and I've been in that mode, I was nearly attacked by a group of people in a car. I was alone. There was no one around. And if it wasn't for the fact he couldn't get round the roundabouts to get me, right, I wouldn't be here. I know that. Because he was screaming all kinds of what he was going to do to me, and I froze on the spot. And I can't explain to you why I did that, but I did that for about 10 seconds till I found my legs to realise I'm escaping. He's not coming back around that roundabout. He was a stalker, but as I say, I've had a few incidences with men that are very strange. I've had to have my daughter leave a school over certain someone just recently. Women are very vulnerable to. We try and protect ourselves in the best way we can, without getting hurt too badly, if you know what I mean. And a woman thinks on that way of natural for her to be frightened. I don't think she's a psychopath wielding a knife. But the evidence wouldn't support what they found. Indeed, the girls' fear and confusion is evident in their words, with both questioning what was going on, DM stating she was freaked out and scared and confused, and BF attempting to get them together quickly for safety. If the scaredy cats, they're used to the other girls, and the boyfriends of the girls coming forward and helping, answering the door, getting people away from them, because I'm a big scaredy cat, even though I'm quite domineering in character. I know the difference between person being dominant and person being controlled, Okay. They were clearly under stress and attempting to make sense of a frightening situation. Additionally, the time period was elapsed between what DM saw and her communications with BF about the same was a matter of minutes. The text messages exchange lasts approximately 4 minutes, so they're saying they have a 40-minute period after that. Between that, so that is excited utterance. Okay, now that's after the event, like minutes after what happened. It must have been so quick. Because Xana got a meal delivered at 4, something like that. You know, it was really, really, really quick. How would the girls predict all that? You know, it's silly to blame. The text message exchange lasted approximately 4 minutes, with the messages occurring in rapid succession. This timeline left no time for reflection or fabrication, which is ultimately what and seek to protect against. Consequently, the court concludes that the assertive text messages within these 4-minute periods are likely admissible as present sense of impressions and or excited utterance, assuming the requisite foundation is provided at the time of the trial. So they've got to go to trial and talk about what happened, you know. Yeah. DM texts to the victims. Can they do that without being in front of them? Because that would freak it out after all that. And forever, you know, when you have PTSD, what happens is you're frightened of the things you see. It's a lot to do with your senses. What you see, what you smell. You know, she probably won't be able to go to DoorDash again, or it'll remind her of Xana. She won't be able to get around people wearing masks. She'll be very scared of that. You know, stuff like that. It scars you for life. People with bushy eyebrows, it'll set it off. Trauma is deep, you know. I have a certain thing that I can't even say a word or anything about the object, because if give us, but even the memory in my mind of it is pretty hard to forget, because I have to get trains and things like that, and I have to walk alone. I don't walk alone at night no more. I'm traumatised, you know. I had a man made me get in his car once when I was younger. I was only 23, walking back from my mother's house. He approached. I was like, no, thank you. He went, get in the car. Now, no, you know, I live in a town where no one's around me at night. So I shit myself. He goes, you best get in this car right now, you know. And he made me go to my flat. He took me to my flat, and luckily I got rid of him. Because I live next door to a pub, and the security was on, and the security fellow was like, yeah, I am, and I didn't speak, and I was looking frightened, and I was like, can I stand by you? And he just walked off. Now, he had no problems of getting me to go into my home. God knows what he was going to do to me, you know. So I do these channels because of this, you know, because, okay, there's a lot of good men in the world, there's a lot of decent men, but there's a lot of bad ones as well. They're the type of people that you wouldn't expect either. He probably was married, probably had children, all that, you know, you don't know. Look at Rex Human, you know, normal life, apart from the prostitution and the killing. He had quite a normal background, didn't he? And people don't want to believe that his family knew, but you can turn blind eye to anything. No one knows that way. It was safety that made them keep their mouth shut. Do you know what I mean? It's safety that made these girls, right, be quiet. It was for their own. That's called fright and flight, where you can't make sense of it. She still couldn't make sense of it 12 hours after, you know? So it's like, you can't beat the girl up for that, you know? I'm just very shocked at Circus Crime. He seems a real decent guy. And when I was like watching about what he was saying about the case, I thought he had a decent point, but you know what, maybe because now he's got the paperwork, he'll think differently, but I doubt it. People are really not into backtracking on what they say on crime channels, I've noticed, when they're wrong, you know, on the theories. I wait until I open my mouth. I just don't do it, you know. I've got better sense, you know, because I've been through a lot, I suppose. It's like, you know, when G3 last few months, I think about a month ago, did that, and now she's passed away. Now, a lot of people out there were calling her a liar. You know, she lied about Jeffrey Epstein. She lied about Prince Andrew. How dare people say that? I know what made me realise that she weren't lying about Prince Andrew, the sweating, because he's always sweating over women. He's always been a lech. And liking young girls is a pretty disgusting thing. Liking young women, I don't care, 17 is 17. You know, you're preying and leching over girls that don't even like you. You know, what's the point in going to bed with someone who's just sleeping with you because of the fact you're a prince? You know, or the fact that, like, you know, she's been ordered to by this billionaire. You know, it's not right. You know, it's like, oh, she was a prostitute. No, hang on a minute. You don't know how fearful that girl was in fear. Yeah, you can't say that. I just find people really suck on here with their theories. Don't delve into my channel might not be the best, you know, but yeah, okay. I've made a couple of mistakes, and I'll admit to that one. I said a few comments about a couple of creators, which I was absolutely out of order about, because I actually like them now, so it's difficult to take that back, because they won't take an apology no matter what I say, so I'm going to leave it at that. Two is sometimes when I'm reading documents, I'll go halfway through and I thought, wow, this isn't a new document, this isn't an addition. Why haven't I seen this 56-page document till now, with human and stuff like that? It's because they're court documents. No one's going to advertise the fact that they've put additional details on that, and that's what's happened with the human thing. But this is a new document. Back to this anyway. DM texts to victims at 4:32. DM text, Kaylee, please answer. The state argues this text is admissible. At present sense of impression and excited utterance, defendant does not directly address the text. However, the court finds it is more of a command than a request, an assertion of fact. It is not a fact capable of being proved false or true. Thus, it is barred by the law. Okay, so they're picking up on what is allowed, what's not allowed, what's basically evidence of utterance, excited utterance. At 10:23, DM text Madison asking, are you up? And approximately an hour later, DM text Kaylee, are you up? The state argues the foregoing texts are not hearsay because they will not be introduced for the truth of the matter asserted. Alternatively, the state contends they are, I think, for the timeline. Okay, number 8 footnote says, defendant's argument also ignores the fact that DM indicated to BF that the intruder was leaving the house, in which case it is not surprising the girls did not want to run outside. Had the thoughts crossed their mind at all? Yeah, wouldn't have been safe. 9. Even if it were an assertion, it would qualify as a present sense of impression and or excited utterance. DM had just seen a masked man in her home minutes prior after having an unusual noise, and none of her roommates other than BF are responding to her calls and texts. Her fear is evident in her words she uses, please answer. It is less of a request, an assertion, and more of a desperate plea made out of concern that something is wrong. Present sense of impressions, because they represent a consistency and continuation of DM's texts from the prior night. Defendant disputes, here it goes, disputes the exception applies, pointing out that DM had been awake and accessing social media before she sent texts. Again, the court does not find these texts to be an assertion. They are inquiries, not declarative statements. Even if they were assertions, however, the state intends to omit the statements to establish a timeline of events. They are not hearsay because they are not offered to establish their truth. Therefore, they are not barred. 5. DM's calls and texts to and from others. Makes sense to me. The state contends, I think he's playing on it, really loving it. Can tell. The state, and I'm sure these guys get word about the YouTube streams that they get, and the nutters out there supporting them. The state contends that the text between DM and her dad and the texts from JM and the vandal alert are not hearsay because they will offer simply to show a timeline for the morning and early afternoon. In addition, the state notes that the call from DM to EA is not a statement and therefore not hearsay. The court agrees and will allow the evidence for purpose of timeline if the requisite foundation is laid. B. Verbal communications between BF and DM. The state next contends that it intends to ask DM and BF at trial about statements they made to each other on November 13th, 2002. It argues the testimony will likely replicate that provided that by these witnesses at the grand jury proceeding. The state contends they are admissible under the present sense of impression and or excited utterance exceptions. Defendant does not directly address the argument. To the extent DM and BF seek to testify about the content of the calls and texts and conversations about what they perceived during the 4:30 time frame, they could be potentially admissible under the exception cited by state. However, the state must establish the foundational requirements for such offered statements. The grand jury testimony does not appear to include any conversations between them after 4:19 a.m. to 4:37 a.m. time frame, and the state has not pointed any out. Thus, the extent they testified to oral conversation they had after they woke up the next morning The court will reserve ruling and consider any hearsay objections at the time. Number 10 footnote. The state does not address the content of that phone call. However, the court finds it likely qualifies as a present sense of impression. DM testified that she asked EA to come over and check the house because she was scared. She is describing her fear at the time. She is experiencing it. Beyond that, the specifics of what she said regarding what DM saw hours prior to be analysed at the time of the trial. "911 call. The state contends that the entirety of the 911 call should be omitted because the statements therein are neither non-hearsay, i.e. not admitted for the truth of the matter asserted, or they are accepted from the hearsay rule as present sense of impressions and or excited utterance. Defendant generally objects to its admissions, but takes particular issue with 3 statements within the call. The court finds defendant objection to the specific 3 statements well placed, but will allow the balance of the call because the statements are either not assertions, not admitted for their truth, and or they are accepted from the rule, as set forth in Exhibit B here too. 1. Initial statements. The 911 call begins with BF telling dispatch, something's happening in our house, and we don't know what. This statement falls squarely within the present sense of impression exception, given that BF was experiencing concern that something was wrong with their roommates, and HG had just instructed her to call 911 after walking through the house. Thereafter, BF attempts to provide dispatch with the address of the house before an unidentified female speaker takes the phone and provides address and BF's phone number. This exchange is not offered for the truth of the matter asserted and therefore not barred by any hearsay. 2. Female. One of our roommates who passed out and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up. State argues this statement is present sense of impression because the female speaker is describing the scene around her. However, as the defendant points out, the roommate at issue in the statement is Xana. The only individuals who saw Xana unresponsive were DM, BF and HG. Thus, a defendant contends the exception does not apply because the female speaker never saw Xana unresponsive, thus lacks first-hand knowledge of the information contained in the statement. The inquiry here turns on whether the event of the female speaker is describing or explaining is that Xana is unresponsive, as defendant contends on whether it is more generally the scene unfolding at the house, i.e. that their friends saw Xana unresponsive. The female speaker did not personally perceive the former, but she did personally perceive the latter. 11. Portions of the call may qualify under the IRE, i.e. statements for the purpose of medical treatment or diagnosis. Because the parties have not argued this exception applies, the court will reserve ruling on it pending a foundation being laid and an opportunity to brief and argue its applicability. When the words themselves are considered, it is clear the event being described is that Xana is unresponsive, not that the speaker's friends saw Xana unresponsive. In other words, she is relaying 911 what her friend observed and relied on her. Her statement is therefore outside her present sense of impression, and thus the exception. The 911 caller reporting that there's a cop beating the shit out of a guy now was not a present sense of impression, because he was reporting what others in the house were seeing and describing to him. Thus the statement is not admissible under the exception. I see. 3. Female. Oh, and they saw some man in the house last night, yeah? The statement argues that the statement is both present sense of impression and an excited utterance because it is in response to finding Xana unresponsive. Defendant responds that the statement references in events DM saw 8 hours prior to the 911 call, and therefore is not contemporaneous. Defendant also points out that the female speaker does not have personal knowledge and is simply repeating what she was told by others. The court agrees that the present sense of impression exception does not apply to the statement because the speaker is recounting what someone else perceived. Additionally, there is no contemporaneity. I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah, I am. Since she is describing an event that occurred 8 hours earlier. The excited utterance exception does not apply here either. Instructive here states of Fox where Idaho Supreme Court considered whether the excited utterance exception applied to the 911 call made by a man after she found a woman screaming for help for a friend whom she said just been pistol whipped by a man who fled the scene. This is talking about scenarios, yeah? 911 caller had not seen what happened but relayed to dispatch what the victims told him about the incident. The court held that the district court erred by admitting the 911 call's statement to dispatch as excited utterance because the caller's voice was calm and he had not experienced a startling event or condition. Here, likewise, the audio of the 911 call does not indicate that the speaker's normal, reflective thought processes were rendered inoperative. Her voice sounds calm relative to BFs and DMs. Although a slight nervousness can be detected in her voice, she is not audibly crying. 12 footnote. By contrast, the state versus Paoli, the Idaho Court of Appeals found exception applied to the 911 call made by the victim of battery immediately after it happened. This is a scenario. Noting the tone of her voice and the audio recording showed that she was still under stress of excitement caused by the altercation. Breathing heavily. In fact, the speaker took over speaking to dispatch because she was more composed than BF, who initiated the call. Further, the speaker did not personally see Xana unresponsive, nor did she see a man allegedly in the house. She is simply repeating what others told her. So the statement does not provide insights into her own thought process. Consequently, the statement must be redacted. 4. DM's attempts to explain the events. After the female speaker cedes the phone to DM identifies herself and asks if she can tell dispatch what happened. Dispatch responds by asking what is going on and if someone is passed out. This exchange will not be offered for truth of the matter asserted, and therefore is not hearsay. However, DM then states, I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m. The state argues this statement is a present sense of impression and or an excited utterance, because DM is trying to explain to the dispatcher what she saw while under current excitement after realizing that her roommate is not waking up and something could be wrong in the house. Defendant disagrees, noting that the event DM begins to describe was occurred 8 hours prior. He further argues it is not excited utterance because she and BF had several hours to reflect on what she had seen and experienced at 4 a.m. Defendant is correct that the statement does not qualify as a present sense of impression. While DM personally perceived the event she is beginning to describe, the contemporaneity aspect is missing. She is attempting to narrate an event she saw 8 hours earlier. The excited utterance exception does not apply either. While DM is no doubt under stress of excitement caused by the realizing Xana is unresponsive, her reflexive thought processing appears intact. She is starting to draw connections between Xana being unresponsive and what she saw and heard 8 hours prior, something she had time to reflect on. She does not launch spontaneous into what she saw at 4 a.m. Rather, she asks the dispatcher if she can explain what she saw. Based on this exchange, it is clear her powers of reflection are quite active, thus obviating the purpose behind the exception. The statement is therefore not admissible, but is redacted. I see. So, wow, it's so deep, isn't it? It's so into the English language and the way we react, isn't it? It's interesting because it's valuable in a case like this. Statements regarding Xana. Dispatch then instructs DM to find out if someone has passed out. DM appears to make statements to bystanders that they have to go check for Xana has passed out. This is not offered by the state for truth of the matter and therefore is not hearsay. DM then states Xana is not waking up. HG is heard stating Xana in the background. These are squarely present sense of impressions because they are describing what the speakers are seeing. DM then responds to dispatcher's inquiry of Xana's age, again not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Before HG takes the phone and confirms that Xana is not breathing, this is also present sense of impression and also likely falls within the IRE. 6. Statements after law enforcement provided. Around the time HG confirmed to dispatch that Xana was not breathing, law enforcement had arrived on the scene. HG can be heard telling DM, I need you to talk to them. I can't talk to them. I need you to talk to them. The court finds this admissible as either a present sense of impression or excited utterance. HG had just discovered Xana's body moments before. He is operating under stress of his discovery and attempting to answer dispatch questions. His statement describes an inability to speak to law enforcement at the moment and therefore are admissible. At that point, DM took the phone again and dispatch instructed her to get a defibrillator. If one was available, DM asked dispatch to repeat the question and stated, there's a police here right now. After dispatch repeated the question, DM indicated they did not have a defibrillator and asked the responding officer if he did. The officer responded affirmatively, after which dispatch indicated she was going to let the officer take over and end the call. The extent of the state seeks to admit the statements by DM for their truth. They qualify as present sense of impressions as DM is explaining the events as they are happening. They also are likely admissible under the IRE 803. Insofar as they regard the defibrillator, finally many of the statements are not assertions and thus not hearsay. 7. Crying, breathing heavily is non-hearsay. Crying and breathing heavy is non-hearsay. Apart from the statements, the state also moves for admission of audible crying, breathing and heavy breathing made by the 911 callers. Defendant does not address the argument and the court finds it well placed. While assertive conduct can qualify hearsay, non-assertive conduct does not. Person's non-verbal emotional reaction does not normally qualify as an assertion under Rule 801 because it is not intended to communicate information. There is no indication in the 911 call that the speakers are intending to make an assertion through their crying and heavy breathing. It is clearly an involuntary emotional response to the circumstances. With Xana not waking up, Further, it is relevant to show the stress and emotional impact the girls were under, which puts the call into context, thus it is admissible. D. Transcript of the 911 call will be allowed as demonstrative evidence. The final issue is whether to allow the final issue is to allow the jury to view the official transcript of the 911 call. While listening to the call, defendant contends it would be cumulative and asks that either the call or the transcript be allowed, but not both. The court views this as essentially a request for the use of the transcript as a demonstrative aid. Demonstrative exhibit is relevant if it supplements the testimony of the witnesses or assists the jury in obtaining a better understanding of the facts and issue. Transcripts are widely used as demonstrative tools to help the jury understand the contents of the audio recordings. When used in this way, the courts will typically instruct the jury that the transcript is not evidence independent of the audio recording, and if the jury determines that the transcript is incorrect, it should disregard it to that extent and rely on its own interpretation of the audio recording. In addition, the transcript must be authenticated by showing that it fully and accurately complies with the audio recording. Against this background, the court will permit the transcript of the 911 call to be used as a demonstrative aid, assuming the proper foundation for the 911 call is established and the transcript properly authenticated. To this end, the state is responsible for proposing an appropriate jury instruction. The transcript will not be admitted as substantive evidence and will not be available to the jury except when the 911 call is being played, including during deliberations, because it is not going to be issued as evidence. The court does not find the transcript is cumulative and the 911 audio or otherwise prejudicial to evidence. So it's not going to be evidence because at the time lapse perhaps and that this may well require the transcriptionist to testify that he or she accurately transcribed the call. Rather than passing out an individual copies of the transcript to the jury, it may be best to time the audio with the text of the transcript played, with the jury with the closed captioning. Otherwise, there is concern the jury will read ahead or focus too much on one portion of the transcript and not another. However, the actual audio exhibit without the captioning is the one that will go back to the jury. 5. Order. Based on the foregoing state of motion in Limena, text messages and testimony is granted in part and reserved in part, and the state motion in Limena 911 call is granted in part and denied in part and reserved in part. It is so ordered, dated 24th of April 2025. So it's just very recently been published. The text messages and phone activity in Exhibit A. This is the exhibit they're talking about. At 2:10 a.m., DM to Uber driver inquiring if he was driving. Ruling, not hearsay, not an assertion, not offered for truth of matter asserted. At 2:13 a.m., Uber driver to DM confirming he was driving. Not hearsay, not offered for truth of the matter asserted. Not important, really. At 2:53, Madison Morgan calls BF. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 3:51 a.m., DM creates a new contact in her phone. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:19 a.m., BF calls DM for 23 seconds. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:20 a.m., DM calls Xana. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:20 a.m., DM calls Kaylee. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:20 a.m., because it's proven, it's on the phone, DM calls BF for 41 seconds. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:21, BF calls Xana. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:21 a.m., DM calls Madison. Not hearsay, not assertion. BF calls Ethan Chapin. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:22, DM to BF. No one is answering. So she creates a new contact in her phone, and from 4:19, she's calling. BF is calling. No one's answering. And she's just basically trying to make, it just sounds like, what would you do in that situation? I don't know. 4:22, DM to BF. I'm really confused. Present sense of impression and or excited utterance. 4:22, DM to Kaylee. Not hearsay, not assertion. 4:22 DM to Kaylee, what's going on? Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:23 BF outgoing message to Snapchat. The record of the message itself is not hearsay since it is not an assertion. The content is not before the court. Well, who's she messaging on Snapchat? Her dad? Who? At 4:23 BF to DM. Yeah, dude, what the fuck? Excited utterance and present sense of impression. At 4:23 BF to DM. Xana was wearing all black. Wow, she thought it was Xana. Excited utterance and present sense of impression. At 4:23 DM to BF. I'm freaking out. Excited utterance and or present sense of impression. At 4:23 DM to BF. No, it's like a ski mask, almost. Excited utterance or present sense of impression. At 4:23 BF to DM. Shut the fuck up. Because she's only realising what the hell is going on. I think BF is a bit in shock. 4:23 BF to DM. Actually, excited utterance or present impression. 4:23 DM to BF. Like he had something over his head and over his mouth. And it's the fact she says he. So BF doesn't know it's a he. She thinks it's Xana, yeah? But Dylan thinks it's she's realising it's a man, you know? To the extent BF or DM testifies at trial to what she said in this conversation, their statements are likely admissible as present sense of impressions and excited utterance, which state will have established foundation for the statements at trial. I don't like mentioning second names. At 4:24 DM to BF. Bethany, I'm not kidding. I'm so freaked out. Excited utterance and or present sense of impression. At 4:24 BF to DM. So am I. Oh gosh. Excited utterance and a present sense of impression. At 4:24 DM to BF. Phone is going to die. Excited utterance and or present sense of impression. 4:24 BF to DM. Come to my room. Not hearsay, not an assertion, alternatively excited utterance. 4:24 BF to DM. Run. Not hearsay, an assertion, alternatively excited utterance. Down here, she says to Dylan. Not hearsay, not assertion, alternatively excited utterance. At 4:24, DM calls Ethan Chaplin. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:24, DM to BF. I'm scared though. Excited utterance or present sense of impression. At 4:25, BF to DM. Yeah, I know, but it's better than being alone. Excited utterance and a present sense of impression. So they're going through each statement they're making over the phone and putting what it's basically indicating and what their experience, the prosecution's experience of shock, you know. 4:27 DM outgoing message to Snapchat. The record of the message itself is not hearsay since it is not assertion. The content is not before the court. At 4:27, that's not going to help this girl. DM outgoing message to Snapchat. The record of the message itself is not hearsay since it is not an assertion. The content is not before the court. It's a lot of messaging. 4:27, DM calls Kaylee. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:28, DM calls Xana. Not hearsay, not an assertion. Oh my gosh. At 4:29, BF calls Madison. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:30, BF calls Madison. Again. Not hearsay, not an assertion. At 4:30, BF calls Kaylee again. For the first time. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:30, BF calls Kaylee again. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:32, DM texts Kaylee, please answer. Not hearsay, not assertion. Alternative present sense of impression, excited utterance. At 4:31, BF accessed Snapchat. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 4:37, BF accessed Instagram. Not hearsay, not assertion. So that'll be in court. At 10 a.m. to 10, so they must have went asleep or just stood in shock in the room, I don't know, for all that time. DM accessed social media and messaged on Snapchat. Not hearsay, not assertion. The content of the messages is not before the call. At 10:23, DM to Madison, are you up? Not hearsay, not assertion, and or offered the truth of the matter. At 10:24 a.m. to 11:29 a.m., DM accessed social media messaged on Snapchat. Not hearsay, not assertion. The contents of the message is not before the court. So they're proper in shock. They're not even realising what the fuck's going on, are they? At 4:29 a.m., DM accessed. Oh yeah, right there. At 4:39, DM and Dad exchanged texts. Not hearsay, not offered for truth of the matter asserted. At 11:49, BF calls JM. The record of the call itself is not hearsay since it's not an assertion. The content is not before the call. At 11:50, JM to DM, bro. Not hearsay, not assertion. 11:50, BF phone call to EA. Not hearsay, not assertion. At 11:51, JM to DM, do you guys need me to come and get you? Not hearsay, not assertion, and not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. At 1:04 p.m, DM receives a vandal alert. Moscow PD investigating homicide on King Road near campus. Suspect is not known at this time. Stay away from the area and shelter in place. Not hearsay, not offered for truth of the matter asserted. The transcripts, 911 call, Exhibit B. Page 3, lines 4 to 5. 911 operator, 911 location of your emergency. Not hearsay, not asserted. Page 3, line 6 and 8. BF, hi, something is happening. Something has happened in our house. A sense of impression. A present sense of impression. And we don't know what's happened, she says. Page 3, line 9, 10. 911 operator, what is the address of your emergency? Not hearsay, not assertion. Page 3, line 11, BF 1122. She's given the address. Not hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 3, line 12, 13. Operator, what is the rest of the address? Not hearsay, not assertion. Page 3, line thing. Oh, King's Road, Bethany says. Not hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. At page 3, lines 15 to 16, these are the things they're included, and now they've excluded trivial matters. They've put what's essential for the case to prove their innocence and prove that he's the killer, you know. Okay, and it's that house or an apartment. Page 3, line 17, BF, it's a house. Not hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 3, line 18, 19. Operator, can you repeat the address and make sure that I have it right? Not hearsay, not asserted. Page 3, lines 20 to 21. Female speaker, I'll talk to you as we are, so we are next to them. Not hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 3, lines 22 to 23. The operator says, I need someone to repeat the address for verification. Not hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 3, lines 24 to 25. Female speaker, so the address is 1122 King Road. Not hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 4, lines 1, 2. 911 operator, and what's the phone number that you're calling from? Not hearsay, not an assertion. and there's a footnote here. The transcript referenced herein attached to the state's reply to defendant objections to state motion in Limena 911 call March 24th, 2025. It is entitled Transcription of Audio File entitled 22MO9903 911 call and certified by the court reporter. 2. For statements by 911 operator that the court has indicated herein are not assertions. To the extent they can be construed as assertions, they are not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted and therefore not hearsay. Page 4. Female speaker, what's your phone number? Non-hearsay, not an assertion. So she's asking Bethany. Page 4, line 4, BF is redacted. Page 4, line 5, female speaker, redacted. It must be the phone number they're redacting. Page 4, line 6, BF redacted, not applicable. Page 4, line 7, female speaker, redacted. What's the rest? Redacted, and then what's the rest? Not hearsay, not an assertion. Page 4, line 8, BF redacted, non-applicable. I can never say my words right in the morning. Page 4, line 9. Female speaker redacted. NA. I'm just going to say that. Page 4, lines 10 to 11. 911 operator. Okay, and tell me exactly what's going on. Not hearsay, not an assertion. Page 4, lines 14 to 12. Female speaker. One of our roommates has passed out and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up. Hearsay does not qualify as present sense of impression. Page 4, line 15. 911 operator. Okay. Non-hearsay, not an assertion. Page 4, line 16. Female speaker. Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Hearsay does not qualify as present sense of impression or excited utterance. It's hearsay, basically. It's a lot, isn't it? I mean, I haven't read this much out before. I don't know what page I'm up to. 21. Page 4, line 80. 911 operator. And are you with the patient? Non-hearsay, not an assertion. Page 4, line 19. DM. Hi, this is Dylan. Non-hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 4, lines 20 to 21. 911 operator. Okay, I need someone to keep the phone. Stop passing it around. Non-hearsay, not an assertion. Page 4, lines 21 to 23. DM, can I just tell you what happened pretty much? Non-hearsay, not an assertion. I thought she mentioned the 4 a.m. Or are they not putting that in? I don't know. Page 4, lines 24 to 25. 911 operator. What is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now? Non-hearsay, not an assertion. Oh, here we go. Page 5, lines 1 to 2. DM, I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m. Hearsay does not qualify as excited utterance or present sense of impression. Don't have a break. Jesus Christ, everyone's knocking at my door like it's totally too early. I tell them my daughter's not here and they still bloody knock. Okay, now back to this. Page 5, line 10 to 11, DM, inaudible. What's wrong? She's not waking up. Present sense of impression. Page 5, lines 12. HJ, Xana, like she's waking her up, you know. Present sense of impression. Page 6, line 13 to 14. 911 operator. Okay, one moment, I'm getting help started that way. Not hearsay, not offered as truth of the matter asserted. Page 5, lines 15 to 17. Okay, thank you. What's wrong? Background noise. Not hearsay offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 5, line 18. HJ, unaudible, non-hearsay, non-assertion. Page 15, line 19. 911 operator. Okay, and how old is she? Page 5, line 20. DM says she's 20. Page 5, line 21. 911 operator. 20, you said. Non-hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 5, lines 20. It's just devastating. 20. Lines 22 to 23. He's crazy. DMs, yes. 20. Here. Talk to them. Non-hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 5, line 24. HJ, hello. Non-hearsay, non-assertion. Page 5, line 25. 911 operator. Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people. Non-hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 6, lines 3 to 4. HJ. Okay, sorry, they just gave me the phone. Non-hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 6, line 5. 911 operator. Is she breathing? Non-hearsay, non-asserted. Page 6, line 6. HJ. She's unaudible. Hello? Non-hearsay, not asserted. Page 6, line 7. 911 operator. Is she breathing? Line 6. Page 6, lines 8. No. Present sense of impression, potentially, and it says IRE 80304. Page 6, lines 9 to 10. 911 operator. Okay, radio please. In the background. Non-hearsay, non-assertion. Page 6, lines 11 to 13. HJ, that's Dylan. I need you to talk to them. I can't talk to them. I need you to talk to them. Present sense of impression and or excited utterance. Page 6, line 14. DM. Dylan. Okay, hello. Non-hearsay, non-assertion. Page 6, lines 15 to 16. 911 operator. Okay, I have already sent the ambulance and law enforcement. Stay on the line. Non-hearsay, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 6, line 17. DM. Okay, non-hearsay, not an assertion. Page 6, lines 18 to 20. 911 operator. If there's a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it. Non-hearsay, non-assertion. Page 6, lines 21 to 22. Dylan says, say that again. There's a police here right now. Non-hearsay, non-offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Alternatively, present sense of impression. Page 6, lines 23 to 25. Operator. Okay. If there's a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it. Page 7, lines 1 to 2. DM. We don't have one. Do you have a defibrillator? Present sense of impression. Page 7, line 3. Officer nods, yep. Page 6, line 4. DM, yes, we have one. Present sense of impression. Page 7, line 5, 6. Operator says, okay, are you talking to the officer? Non-hearsay, not an assertion. Page 7, line 7. DM, yes, he's right here. A present sense of impression. And lastly, Page 7, line 8, 9. I know this is terribly tedious, but it gives you a real understanding of the situation, what they're in. Operator, okay, I am going to let you go since he's there with you and can help you. Non-hearsay not offered for the truth of the matter. Page 7. Line 10. DM. Okay, thank you, bye. Non-hearsay not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Page 7, lines 11 to 12. 911 operator. Okay, end of audio. Non-hearsay not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. And that's that, guys. I'm going to read the last bit though. The certificate of service hereby certify that on the 4th of 24th, to me it's the 24th of April 2025, I have served a true and correct copy of the order of the state's motions in Limena, text messages and 911 calls and attachments. Ashley, I'll leave that. Trent Triple, clerk of the court. And that's it, guys. I'm going to leave it there and go for a coffee now. And I hope this helps you understand the motions that they're putting in place, what difference between hearsay and utterance, excited utterance and different things like that. It's given me an insight into everything that I didn't know about, and I've worked in legal before. I've learnt lots about how to spot fabrication, chances of fabrication, and I don't think the opportunity was there. I don't feel it happened so quick. I reckon it happened in 3 minutes and it was proper mayhem, yeah. Well, they noticed after a while, and it took in 3 minutes of that time they were communicating. So he was there for those 3 minutes. It doesn't mean it took 3 minutes. That's what we had to pull together in the trial, and it's helped a great deal for me to understand this today, and I hope it helps you too. Well, take care, everyone. Lots of love. Goodbye. Oh, I'll be on later to do Rex Human, the Murder Inc. article. Please join me for that. I will be live in a short while. Let's say in about it's 10:30 now. I'll be on at 12:30. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.